Hi, I'm Alex Naimushin. I'm a student filmmaker in Washington State. Now, Washington isn't exactly known for its film scene, so recent headlines came as a surprise to many.
Bill to increase incentives for motion pictures to film in Washington passes legislature.
Bill aims to boost incentives for filming in Washington.
Naturally, I looked over the bills in question. And when I did, I found something interesting. Before all the legalese began, there was one line that stood out to me.
The legislature finds that in recent years, the state has realized a drastic decline in motion picture production that precludes economic expansion and threatens the state's reputation as a production destination.
Wait, Washington was a production destination? This is Marty Oppenheimer. He was a big part of the Washington film industry in its heyday.
The advent of incentives made our film industry get smaller here. The film industry in Washington is smaller now than it was 30 years ago. And that's an unfortunate truth. And the reason that it's smaller now than it was 30 years ago is because 30 years ago was before the incentives, and now is Washington with fairly pitiful incentives. The Washington film industry was growing rather nicely through the 70s and particularly through the 80s. And film production in general was decentralizing from Los Angeles and New York. It was moving out because equipment was more mobile, because film stocks were faster, because styles of productions had changed. And so Washington, and to a lesser extent Oregon, were getting work that was coming up here from Los Angeles. And then in about 93, it crashed in Washington. And the reason it crashed was that Canada put incentives in place. So a lot of business went to Canada, and a lot of businesses stayed in Canada.
Now, there were two kinds of incentives that were put in place. One type was a tax credit, where companies would be able to write off a percentage of money spent on production, and thus pay less in taxes. The other type was a subsidy, where a percentage of money spent would be reimbursed directly.
As production incentives started to kick in and various other states learned about it, Louisiana was the next one to kick in, and they put an incentive in place. And suddenly all kinds of stuff was shooting in Louisiana. New Mexico put an incentive in place, and all kinds of stuff was shooting in New Mexico. We've seen over time some states put film incentives in, some states take them away. Michigan put in the craziest incentive at one point. Their incentive was 42%, which was really attractive. And when they put that in place, TV series and feature films thronged to Michigan, and production services companies that weren't in Michigan suddenly opened offices in Michigan, because Michigan was hopping. Sometime later, they changed governors. And the new governor said, this isn't real. These people, there's no real film industry here. We don't need this. So they did away with the incentive, and all of that work left. The problem that Washington has had is that our incentive from the time it was put in place in 2006 until this July has been $3.5 million a year. $3.5 million doesn't do anything for you. For a while there, we had a sci-fi channel series called Z Nation, a zombie takeover of the country. And that was out of Spokane. And there was a company in Spokane that historically had worked as a production service company for LA companies, and that's what they did in this case. And that was all fine, that was all legal. But that pretty much ate the whole incentive for the years that was shooting here, because $3.5 million was nothing.
So it's clear that the budget for incentives needed to increase. But now that it has, how should the local industry change as a result?
You have a big series or a big feature, and there's lots of local people, but the higher end people are from Los Angeles, and the people on the bottom are learning from the people on the top, and that's how it grows, and that's how British Columbia grew. And that's not what we've done here. Now, with $15 million a year, they're going to be able to do more than they could do with 3.5, but not much. And again, bad attitude boy here says, if a real film industry is a good idea for the state of Washington, and I believe it is, you have to put at least $100 million a year into an incentive program to have anything that comes close to work. From my point of view, film incentives are a bad idea. The whole notion of come to our state and shoot and we will give you money is just inherently a bad idea. But it's the way the system works. So if you want to play, this is the way you have to play. And you can take the moral high road and say, we shouldn't be giving money away for things like this. Okay, I agree with you. But then you're not going to have film production here. If you want to have production, then you got to play.